Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sovereign Lovestream.
Hello, happy Sovereign Sunday. Thank you for joining us this week. This week, our topic is victim mentality and the law of attraction. And it looks like we already have a bunch of comments regarding both things, so this should be exciting. We are your host. I'm Vanessa. This is Danny. And do you want to get us started?
Sure. So we came up with this topic because this morning I was scrolling through Facebook, and I have a very dear friend of mine who I love this guy. And it's been very hard because over the years, I've just seen him in this pattern of just like, he just seems to have no luck, right? And I know that I've been in that place too. Trying to like think of how to say this, right? Because I don't want to come off as judgy or like victim blaming at all, because I'm not. We all can be in victim mentality. And I just really love this guy, and I really want to see him like manifest some better and more positive things in his life. And I just see him on this hamster wheel. And sometimes it's really hard to talk to your friends about some of the negative patterns that they find themselves into, right? Because people can get defensive. And already we had some comments that seemed like there was a little bit of a defensive posture, right? Like, oh, what do you mean by victim mentality? So sometimes it's hard to talk to our friends about these patterns because they get defensive. I know that I got defensive for many years when Vanessa and others even have tried to talk to me about sometimes when I get into a victim mentality.
And I've definitely gotten defensive, like about my health situation. There were times where Danny was like, maybe look at it a different way. And I was like, you don't know what it feels like. You don't know what it's like to be in my skin, and it's not fair. And if you were going through the same thing, you would feel it too. So there's definitely that tendency we have to have that reaction to defend our right to feel a certain way about our circumstances.
Yeah, so seeing this guy, some of these posts this morning, and just the compassion that I felt for him, like, reminded me of my past self, reminded me of times when I was in that victim mentality. And so if you're watching and you feel like, oh, this is you, whether you're my friend or not, just know that this comes from a place of compassion. And I love you, and I want to see you manifest better things in your life, and I want to see you live in joy. And I really believe it's possible. And I know you might not be in a place right now where you have the strength to hope. And that's totally understandable. There have been times in my life where I was in that mode, and I was so depressed that I couldn't get out of bed for months at a time. So I've been there. I've felt that way. I get it, and I can empathize. And so I just want to encourage you and everyone. We want to encourage everyone to live your best life. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how we overcame our victim mentalities. And hopefully you can, get some encouragement from that and start to manifest some better things in your life.
Yep. All right, so let's jump in. Do you want to share your example? Should I share my example?
I can start, or if you want to start,
go for it.
What was the example that we had discussed?
All right, I'll start with my example.
We have so many.
My major example is probably my health. I have for years been dealing with polycystic ovarian syndrome and insulin resistance. It's led to issues with fertility. It's led to, it causes a hormonal imbalance. And I've been struggling with this for so many years. About maybe, I would say 5 or 6 years ago, things got really bad. My health took kind of a turn for the worst, and I was really stuck in, I am a victim of my health. I'm a victim of these circumstances. It's not fair. Why do other people get to be healthy and I can't be healthy? And it seemed that no matter what solutions I came up with, what techniques or or protocol I tried, it didn't work. And
just for clarification, we're talking diets, vitamins, fasts, cleanses, all of these different things.
I went to many different doctors. I mean, I tried regular doctors, and then I tried holistic doctors. And so I've tried a lot of things, and my symptoms tend to be symptoms that aren't as common for most people with polycystic ovarian syndrome. So it can get really irritating, and I would cry about it. I would be frustrated about it. I was in a deep depression about it for a really long time. And there were a lot of instances where Danny would say things like, "You're making this your story." And I did. I mean, if you looked at my Facebook page a couple of years ago, I was all about, the fact that I was suffering from this, that I was dealing with this constantly. I was complaining about it all the time, about how unfair it was, about me just being a victim of these circumstances, and why me? Why does it have to be this way? And I, looking back on it, I can see how often I was pulling this in and just wallowing in the self-pity over how sick I was. And there were times where, so Danny would say things like, you're making this your story, and it doesn't have to be this way. And I would, lash out at him. You don't know what it's like to be dealing with this. You don't know what it's like to be dealing with the pain, with the hormonal imbalance that causes me to feel certain ways. You don't understand it. It's not fair. You get to eat whatever you want and not have these like, it doesn't trigger your health issues, so it's not fair for you to say that to me. And I lived on this hamster wheel for quite some time. It affected our relationship, our ability to relate to each other. I was moody. I was working in the city at the time, and it created all sorts of frustrations with my job. I couldn't enjoy anything. I really struggled to just enjoy life because I was going through these issues, and it was really frustrating at the time.
And in her defense, I was not the most empathetic when I was telling her, this is your story. You just need to change your mind. You need to think positively. I was not doing it in an empathetic way. It was definitely coming from more of a critical and judgmental place. And I think that somebody mentioned Candace Owens in the comments. I guess I'm not familiar. I don't follow her. I've heard some of her stuff. She's, I feel like, an alt-right perspective, and I don't follow her, but I guess she must talk about victim mentality. And I think the right, and maybe the alt-right, I don't know, maybe the kind of Jordan Peterson school, they do talk about victim mentality. And I think the disconnect, the reason why the left, who fancies themselves as more compassionate and empathetic, rejects that point of view of victim mentality is because the message is not delivered in an empathetic way. It's delivered in a very judgmental, like, just fix yourself and get over it, and then everything will be fine. Mm-hmm. And maybe in some ways, yes, she's admitting now, Vanessa can see that she did have a victim mentality, and she was wallowing in that point of view where this is just who I am. I have this health problem, and there's no way I'm going to get over it, and I've tried everything. And so I guess I just have to live with this. And she would just wallow in that depression. So yes, while that's true, the only way to help someone out of that depression is by empathizing with them. And this is something that I had a lot of trouble with and did not do. And I think both of us, a lot of our problems, we kind of went through that hamster wheel for a long time. Yes. Because we weren't really empathizing with each other. So instead of me being like, oh, wow, I can really understand how you feel and how depressing it is to be stuck in that mentality where you feel like you just can't get ahead. You have no luck. No matter what you do, you can't seem to overcome this challenge. But I'm here with you, and we'll do it together. And no matter what, we'll just keep supporting each other. Had I approached it from that angle, if Jordan Peterson and or this kind of like the right-wing side who is talking about victim mentality approaches it from a more compassionate perspective, I think they will absolutely reach a lot more people. And people will start to see that, you know what, no matter who tries to keep me down or whatever I think I'm a victim to, if I start looking at it as if this is a challenge to be overcome and how can I use creativity to solve this challenge, I think we will see a lot less of victim mentality.
Yeah.
Right.
I wanted to address this comment. People can become addicted to excitement and even chaos, or like chaos junkies. And especially when it comes to health and depression and anxiety, I've read Joe Dispenza, and he talks a lot about how when we have an experience, but when we have a trauma, for example, our body, whenever we have any particular type of emotion, there's like a recipe or a cocktail of hormones that get released.
A hormonal profile.
Exactly. And so what ends up happening is that if we experience multiple traumas, or if we experience a trauma and we stay in it, we constantly repeat the story, we tell people about it all the time, our body doesn't know the difference between it actually happening and us talking about it. So it continues to bring out those hormones, and your body becomes addicted to those hormones. And so it almost starts looking for those situations where it can use those hormones again, because now your body has become used to. You're
used to that hormonal profile. And so you're subconsciously creating these situations that will help inspire that hormonal profile.
And
it literally is a chemical addiction.
Yeah. And so I totally believe that. And I agree that happens. I was in a place where I was so used to wallowing, so used to just being sad about it and frustrated. I joined all sorts of groups, like support groups. And really what it was in many cases was groups of people just complaining about their circumstances just like me. And I was like, oh my God, there are others out there that are suffering just like me. And I found my tribe. And really, I would look at these stories and feel bad for them and kind of, get back into this cycle, this hamster wheel of constantly thinking about my misfortune, my sadness about it. And especially with the fertility aspect of it, I was really stuck in this sadness over not being able to have a child. And meanwhile, Danny has a child from a previous marriage. We co-parent this child, and he lives with us half of the time. We get to experience him. And I was so stuck in my frustration, my victimhood of not being a parent, not being like a biological parent, that I was missing out on the opportunities to have a relationship with Danny's son. And it was really frustrating for the three of us. I think that dynamic of me like pulling away, me just saying, well, he's not really my son, so I don't have a say, and he's never gonna love me the way he's gonna love a biological parent. That's just not the way it's gonna work. He has a mom, so he doesn't need me. He has a mom, he has a dad, he's all set. I'll just do the basic care giving, the bare minimum in some ways. And not to say that I was always checked out, but I would oscillate. Like there were moments where I was like, all right, I'm all in, I'm going to be a parent. And then at the slightest perception of rejection, I would shut down again. And I'd be like, all right, well, I'm not his mom, so I can't really say anything. I can't do anything. I'm just gonna, I'll just take care of him like a babysitter. And once I began to overcome this victimhood, I realized, and actually it took at some point my mom saying, like, what are you so upset about? I mean, I understand it's not the same thing to have a child that you bring into the world, a child that you have, that's with you 24/7, that depends on you. It's not the same as co-parenting. But you have an opportunity to parent. You have an opportunity to, how much does the universe love you that it still brought you the opportunity to parent in some way. And to hear my mom say that to me was a little bit like, whoa, wait a minute, what is she saying right now? And I realized I was missing out on a lot of opportunities. And I think from the moment that I began to shift that mentality, my relationship with Xander changed a lot. My relationship with Danny changed a lot because I wasn't resenting him for that. I did have moments of resentment because I felt Danny didn't understand what it really meant for me to want to have a child, because Danny already has a child. He's not desperate to have a child the way I am. He's, especially back at the time where he wasn't as empathetic. And so it took me pulling myself out of that mentality. And it was really funny because my best friend at the time was helping me work through some of these emotional issues. And one of the things she came back with when we were talking about the fertility issue was the miracle will be you changing your mind. And I took that to mean, oh, I'm going to have to change my mind and decide that I don't want to have a child. Like I'm going to have to let go that I don't need to have a child. And it really wasn't specifically that. It was more of letting go of the attachment and allowing what the situation was to just be. I was attached to how I was going to be a parent. I can only be a parent in this way. And that attachment was preventing me from seeing the abundance of love, the abundance of family life that I already had. And I do have that. We have an amazing experience with Xander, where at this point we're homeschooling. We get to go on all sorts of adventures. We've gone on vacations together. And, you know, it was really funny because we have this with this group text. It's Danny, Xander, and I. And yesterday, Xander changed the name of the group and changed it to Family Text. And I thought it was the sweetest thing for him to, you know, I think he's grown up with this dynamic, but to see him kind of look at us that way, to see it as, you know, we're a family, it really means something different to me to have him recognize it that way. And there have been many situations in which he said that. There was a few years ago, I bought a book. It's called Wreck This Journal, and it's basically all these ways in which you destroy this journal. And there was a page where it said, you know, ask a friend to destroy this page, or, you know, like scribble on this with reckless abandon. And I gave it to him, and he looked at me and he was like, but I'm not your friend. And at first I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. And I was like, what? And he was like, we're family. And I was like, oh my God, it was just such a beautiful moment. And I said, yes, we are family, but you're also my friend. So yeah, go ahead, destroy this page. And to have to be open to these moments has changed my perspective dramatically. And I could still be sitting here years into this relationship feeling like, oh my God, it's so unfair. I still don't have a child. And don't get me wrong, I do still have moments where that feeling creeps in, and I allow it to creep in. I allow it to exist, and then I release it. But I'm not wallowing it anymore. And that gives me the opportunity to enjoy all of the other ways in which I'm blessed. And I feel like I really am blessed. And I just kind of took over the stream now.
I mean, that was
with
beautiful.
my little speech.
I think you've covered a lot of not inadvertently, covered a lot of the solutions that we were planning to talk about. So the first solution is probably changing your mind, choosing, and really it is a choice. You can choose to see a challenge as, or a problem as either a problem, something that was done to you, or you can choose it to see it as a challenge that needs to be overcome. And it seems like a simple thing, but it's really like half glass full, half glass empty, or half glass half full. It's like a tongue twister. In choosing how you look at it. So, you know, we drive an old car, and sometimes it has issues and it won't start that day. And you know, we could either get like angry about it, this piece of garbage, it's such an old car, I can't afford a new one. We can take that attitude, or we can be appreciative and say, you know, it's been like 3 or 4 years since something has happened to the car. So, you know, every day we can have gratitude that, another day went by that the car did its job and it got us where we needed to go. And we take a lot of trips with it. And so we can appreciate the fact that for an old car, it doesn't really break down that often. Or we can choose to focus on, once every couple of years it breaks down and I have to spend a few $100 to, you know, maintain it. I mean, you know, right, that these things happen. So we can see it as, or we could look at it in another way. You know, the car breaking down reminds me that I would really prefer, I have a desire to drive a nice new car, a car that I don't have to worry about ever breaking down. Like, I really want a Tesla. I want a Tesla truck. And so I've been working on manifesting this truck. Like, when I'm driving our old Jeep, I'm like, thinking about, because I've actually test driven, a friend of mine had a Tesla and I drove it. And let me tell you, man, those things are like driving clouds. They are so beautiful the way they ride. And so I just imagine it. I think of that memory of driving that car while I'm driving my broken down old Jeep. And I'm like, just how beautiful it would feel to have nice, clean leather seats and to just be floating along the road the way those, and I can't even imagine, because now there's so many more features, the auto drive and all that stuff, that I think it would be a beautiful experience to drive. So I kind of focus on that. And by doing that, I'm using the law of attraction and not limiting myself, right? Like, oh, well, Teslas are expensive. I can never afford a Tesla. I'll never be able to buy a Tesla. If I focus on that aspect of it, I'll get back into that negative, half glass empty mentality. But if I keep it open, like, yeah, right now, maybe I can't afford it, but who knows what the future will bring. And there's new opportunities popping up all the time. And maybe one day I'll be able to. But in the meantime, I can enjoy my old Jeep by pretending it's a Tesla, right? And that may seem silly, but I think it's kind of crucial to like change your perspective that way and change the way you think about things. If you focus much more on the positives, you'll attract more positives. If you're focusing always on the negative, the law of attraction brings in whatever you focus on. You focus on negative, you're bringing in negative.
Yeah.
So why focus on that? Even if it's like you're pretending and you feel like silly pretending, fake it till you make it, right? Eventually, you'll start to see the law of attraction bringing positive things in and that brings us to the second solution, which is gratitude.
Yeah.
Just expressing gratitude for everything that you have, the little things, puts you in that half glass full mentality, and slowly your glass starts to fill up. So over the past couple of years that we've been practicing this, we have really, our life has gotten so much better and we are so much happier and we experience joy so much more often than we used to. We live in Brooklyn. We live in New York City, one of the most like expensive cities on the planet to live in. And no, we don't have our own house. We live in an apartment building, but I work 3 days a week. Vanessa doesn't work at all. And we have a really great meaning a job. She works.
Meaning I don't have to go to the city anymore. I don't have to overwhelm myself with the Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We've found ways in which to have a lifestyle where we get to live our lives and all of our bills are covered. There are times where
it's not just all of our bills are covered. We live a good life. We go on vacations. We go away. I mean,
and sometimes it's really surprising how some of these things happen. It almost seems like miraculous at times where we've definitely gotten to a place where we're like, oh my God, how are we going to pay rent? And then Danny will get a job that's like, a week-long job that's gonna.
I have a small construction business, so so a client will come along and I'll renovate a whole house, and that pays bills for the next few months, and then everything else is just cream on top of that. So we enjoy going out to eat. We're not depriving ourselves of anything. We live a really great lifestyle, and some people might look at us and say, "You live a great lifestyle. You drive this junky old car, and you live in an apartment in a building." But and it's an old apartment too. But, I've renovated a lot of the apartment myself. And I mean, I feel like we have we're really happy. And no, we're not focused on the material things. Certainly, I would love to have, that Tesla, and I would love to have my own house with a built-in pool and a yard, a giant yard that I can do a lot of gardening in. We both would love that. And maybe that's coming down the line, but instead of being angry about the fact that we don't have those things, we appreciate what we do have, and we continue to hope and take action. It's not just about hoping, right? You have to take action.
And it's a lot easier to take action when you're in a place of joy, right? Because here's the thing. If this is your situation as it is, you have the option to take the situation and complain all the way through, or to take the situation and then find the ways in which you can enjoy it, because then that frees up your energy to actually do something different, to pick up an extra job, to pick up an extra hobby that, through this experience, I picked up art again, and that was something
through the experience of the pandemic lockdown.
Yeah, but not just that, just through the experience of finding joy in my life. I've been able to pick up things that I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to try out this way of doing art. I picked up watercoloring. I picked up sacred geometry. I picked up wood burning, all of these things because I'm in a place of joy. If I were in a place of, oh my God, my life is miserable. My
depression just saps all that energy,
my
that creativity.
womb is in pain. My uterus hurts. I'm just going to drink my life away because life sucks. And I used to have that mentality. I had the mentality of life sucks. I'm just going to drink so I can forget all about it. And boom, just wait till the day I die. And there are so many people that probably will have that experience because they choose to have that experience. And once I started to recognize the little ways that I could enjoy my life. Yeah, we don't have a backyard to garden, but guess what? We're growing basil, lemon balm, we're growing peppermint on our fire escape garden.
All of our windows are full of plants.
There are plants all over our apartment. We're growing all sorts of things, and it's fun. You know, we get to experience, we're homeschooling Xander, and that's the thing, right? I used to think homeschooling is for people that have a lot of money. You have to have a lot of money in order to be able to do that. We have the perfect schedules to be able to homeschool, to visit museums, to just visit all sorts of things. We're learning to forage in Brooklyn. We're foraging in the parks and the streets of Brooklyn. And it's really exciting. And we see the world through different eyes then. We're not limited by this idea that life has to look a certain way. And I think sometimes our attachment to the way that life is supposed to look is what prevents us from exploring the endless possibilities that are out there. I mean, if I had gotten stuck into, oh, well, the only way I can be happy, the only way I can experience motherhood is by having a child of my own, then I would limit myself and I wouldn't get to experience motherhood the way I experience it now. I get to be a homeschooling stepmom. Xander is a joy to homeschool. He's fantastic. He's funny. We play video games together. We do artwork together. There are days where we're sitting in our living room on a Tuesday morning, the three of us with drawing pads out, and we're at the dining table and we're all just drawing and coloring and doing whatever for hours. And I think, holy cow, this is our life. We're having art day on a Tuesday morning. Like, how is this our life? But because we allowed it to happen. If we were stuck in the mentality of how are we going to pay our bills? We don't have a nice car. We don't have this. We don't have that. If we were focusing on all of that, we would miss out on the opportunities that we do have.
Tell a story about the cow. And then I want to get into some of these comments because we have some some important points that some people are picking up. But before we get into that, tell the cow story.
Right. So I read this book and I read this story years ago, and I may not get all the parts perfect, but the gist of the story is I believe I don't know if it's a monk or a priest with his apprentice. They're visiting a town and they ask to stay the night at this poor family's house, and they go in and the family's like, of course, welcome, stay the night, we'll take care of you. And this family has a cow, and this family is super poor, but their prized possession is this cow. The only thing of value, in their opinion, is this cow. So their whole lives revolve around this cow, on what the cow is going to eat. And it's like, we have to take care of the cow, and it doesn't matter if the rest of the family is like barely making it. We have to take care of this prized possession because it's the only thing we have. And so the night before the monk and his apprentice leave, the monk kills the cow and they leave in the middle of the night. And the apprentice is like, how is it possible? Why would you do that? This is their only source of income. This is their only thing of value. And the monk's like, this is a lesson. And, I don't know if in the moment the monk explains it, but a year later, they come back and they visit. They're going to check on the family to see how the family's doing. And they get to the house and they realize it's this big house with a beautiful garden. It's this huge property. And they're like, oh my God. The apprentice is like, this poor family probably lost everything. And now a rich person has this house. Look at what we did. And they knock on the door to see if they can find out where the family is. And it turns out the family's there because they had this tragedy fall upon them where their cow was killed. They ended up having to sell the meat. They exchanged I don't know if they exchanged the meat for some seeds. They began planting, and they started harvesting crops, and this changed their whole dynamic. All of a sudden they had crops to sell. All of a sudden their business changed, because before they were selling milk from this cow, and now this tragedy took them in a different direction where they were able to become successful. Again, I don't know if I have this story, all the details down, but that's the gist of the story. And it's always stuck with me, because I think sometimes we become attached to, this is my prized possession. This is a thing I know how to do, so I'm not going to let it go. And then it disappears, or, it gets taken from us, and we see it as a tragedy, but it winds up becoming this opportunity for us to try something different. I lost my job at one point, and I was like, how could this happen? It's not fair. This was my only source.
What are you doing to me?
This is my only source of income right now. What am I going to do? The way the job was set up was perfect. And now how am I going to, what am I going to do? And at that point, when that happened, Danny was like, it's okay. I can cover our expenses right now. You need some time to just take a break from all of it, because I was stressed at my job. As much as I thought this job works for me right now, I was stressed a lot of the time. I was angry a lot of the time. I was frustrated by the job. I was doing social media for a company that had all sorts of nasty comments on their page, and I had to read all of those nasty comments every single day. So it was exhausting. Now, once I got sucked out of that, the opportunities opened up for me to do all, to pick the clients that I get to work with. And I'm not working, as we live close to a park, so I got to spend a lot more time at the park. Again, with the homeschooling Xander, we're able to basically visit all of New York City. We get to go away whenever we feel like it. There's no pressure of, oh my God, I have to be on my laptop 24/7 because God forbid a nasty comment comes up that I need to take care of before it gets out of hand. I was free of all of that. And, I lost my job. That really sucks. How unfair is life? But I could have gotten stuck in that mentality, or I could have started looking around at the things that I could change at this point. And yeah, we were able to go away to Peru. We've been able to travel. We've been able to explore so many different options. Again, I started exploring my artwork. I sold my first art piece last week, and it's really exciting. It changes the way that I've looked at life, and the fact that I don't need to sit at an office for a 9-to-5 job, or even sit in my house attached to my laptop in order to make ends meet. There are endless possibilities of how life can work out for us.
Kathleen, we're going to definitely get to your comments, because I think you bring up really important points. Before we get to that, though, I just wanted to play off what you were just saying. The pandemic has really kind of, in a way, forced people to do a lot of this kind of work, right? So like a lot of businesses had to really shift. Their cow got killed by the pandemic, and so they had to shift and become creative. So we have a local pizzeria here who, because they were no longer allowed to, for a while, they weren't allowed to serve pizza at all. They converted their pizzeria into like a farmer's market kind of thing. And they started selling vegetables and all kinds of like products that were like artisanal, right?
I'm sure that because they sell artisanal pizza, I'm sure that it was all of the products that they were probably receiving, using in the pizzas. Yeah. They just opened it up as a market, and they started selling pizza dough you could take home to make pizza yourself. So they were forced to become more creative to overcome the challenge of people not being able to eat out in restaurants. Now, actually, New York City has passed the new law, which actually, it really isn't a new law. It's more of like they rolled back old laws where you needed a special permit, and it was very hard to get to have an outdoor cafe, right? Like sidewalk tables. Well, now, as a result of the pandemic, New York City has made it a lot easier for businesses to be able to get these permits. And obviously, we'd like to see it where no permit is necessary at all. But I'd much rather a much more liberal, like
yeah, we're just letting, because we understand how the pandemic has affected these restaurants, we're now allowing basically any restaurant to just have a permit to have outdoor tables wherever you can set them up around your business. And they're allowing these restaurants to have the tables in the actual street. So they basically can rope off like 2 parking spots and build a little deck where they can put chairs and tables. So
one of our favorite restaurants actually has room for a lot more tables than they had in their restaurant beforehand.
Yeah, so they can actually serve more customers now than they could before. And now the mayor announced that he's going to continue even after the pandemic is over. He's going to allow these restaurants to keep these permits. It's not just temporary. So some good things have come out of this. People are getting more creative about their businesses. It's fostering innovation. So good things can come from things that seem like they're bad. The cow dies, the pandemic, whatever it is. So I think that that's a great thing. And if you just looked at it as like, we know other businesses that just closed because of the pandemic. They gave up and said, oh, we'll never be able to overcome this challenge. And they just closed their doors, and that was it.
And maybe for those businesses, it creates an opportunity for them to change their course, right? Because if you're not as committed to it and say, all right, well, I can't do this, maybe this isn't the business for you. And maybe this opens the door for you to get a different type of business or get a different type of job. Maybe just owning a restaurant is too much stress for you to begin with. And now you put yourself in a situation where you're working in an office and you're getting a consistent paycheck or whatever the situation is. Changes don't have to be bad. Just because the situation you were in didn't work out the way you wanted it to doesn't mean it's not going to work out at all. And I think that we open up the opportunity for it to be anything once we let go of the attachment to how we want things to look. You want to? Yeah,
I want to talk about Kathleen's comments. This is a really hard situation, and it also plays off what Cheryl was asking about how to handle family and friends that are energy leaks or energy vampires, as Kathleen called them. This is a real thing. There are people that just refuse to get out of a negative mindset, and they can be emotional vampires when they're on that hamster wheel. And no matter how much time and energy or empathy even that you invest into them to try and get them to pull them out of that funk, out of the depression or whatever it is that's holding them back, the addiction to those chemicals are real. The hormones, I mean. So sometimes you're not going to be able to pull them out. So setting strong boundaries, or firm boundaries, I should say, is absolutely a key for this in dealing with that. And so for Kathleen, she felt like she needed to, separate herself from her son. And I hope and pray that that's not a permanent thing, that this may be the wake-up call he needs, because sometimes even with our empathy, we can be enabling people to stay in those patterns, and that's not healthy for them either. So sometimes walking away from somebody or telling them, listen, I love you. I can't have your negativity constantly sucking the energy out of me. So I need a break for a little while. We need to separate for a little while. So I need some time to recharge and do some self-care. And I know, Kathleen, as a parent, that we were just talking about this morning. As a parent, how guilty you must feel. Like my heart, literally, I can feel the pain of that you must be going through right now, to have to pull yourself away from your son. Because I know for me, we were just discussing this morning how, sometimes having kids is frustrating. And then we feel guilty for feeling frustrated about it. And then sometimes we can resent our kids because of the frustration we feel. And then we double down on the guilt, because it's like, now I feel guilty that I resent my kids. Mm-hmm. And it's a hard place to be. But Kathleen, you're not alone. Like I definitely, my son's 9 years old. I can't separate myself from him. And it's obviously not that bad. I don't know what the situation is for you. But you're not alone in feeling that frustration. So just, if you can take any kind of encouragement from that, I can't imagine how hard it must be to be going through this right at this moment for you. But
have compassion for yourself, because I think being a parent is extremely hard. You feel like you have this responsibility forever with your children, and you want them to avoid mistakes. You want them to avoid suffering. You want to avoid their suffering, and they're all experiences. That's what we're here for as humans. We're going to have all sorts of experiences, and it may be difficult to watch your child go through a difficult experience, but there's always something brighter when they get through it. There's a change. Sometimes in my family dynamic, that's happened as well, where my mom tries to protect us from having to suffer, and
she ends up causing suffering sometimes.
She ends up causing, but sometimes we do that. We trip each other up. We trip each other up by trying to avoid somebody else's pain. And sometimes we need to go through the pain. It's part of the learning experience. And it's difficult as a parent to watch your child suffer. I mean, like I said, I'm a stepmom, and even when Xander is going through a lesson himself where he's frustrated about something, I want to avoid it. There are times where I'm just like, okay, I don't want you to be upset, but it's important to teach them to learn to navigate those emotions, and at times it's going to mean them having to deal with those emotions themselves, and something's got to give at some point. The more you enable, the harder it's going to be for them to pull themselves out of it. And there were times that Danny was not empathetic with me, and it led me to look for something within myself, to learn to heal those parts within myself, because if I was expecting Danny to heal it for me, I would have been stuck on the hamster wheel myself.
Yeah.
And so everybody plays certain roles in this world, and yeah, even pulling away from somebody can be beneficial.
And Steve's absolutely right. Reminds me of the story, or not the story, but they always say on the airplane, you put your air mask on first, your oxygen mask, because you're no help to anybody else if you pass out. So you have to focus on and make sure that your mental and emotional health and spiritual health is strong, that you're caring for yourself before you can ever give to anybody else. If your cup is empty, you certainly can't give anybody else a drink. So you can't be so empathetic that you're sacrificing yourself for other people. And, it's funny. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday about dealing with narcissists. And I think that what I had said was that love is the only thing that can heal a narcissist, because we become narcissists because we're our defense mechanisms. We're putting up defense mechanisms, and we cut ourselves off from love and compassion, and then we no longer empathize with other people. And the only way to heal that is to be compassionate. But how do you do that without being abused, without staying in a toxic relationship with the narcissist? And so I think this is what I was trying to communicate. It was through Twitter, so it didn't really come across, I don't think. But what I was trying to communicate was, if you have strong boundaries, if you are centered and you're in a good emotional and spiritual place, and you're taking care of yourself, then you can have the empathy, the compassion, the patience to be able to love other people within their toxic state without allowing their toxic state to affect you, without them dragging you down, becoming emotional vampires. But what Steve's saying is absolutely right, that you need to be able to be taking care of yourself so that you're not being drained. And that was an issue for us, for sure, because yes. she was dealing. I was like a narcissist. I call myself a recovering narcissist, because I was in a place where I was really just focused on myself. I had a really hard time, and my woes, right? Like, that was my victim mentality. Like, I worried about myself first, and I couldn't empathize with other people. And so here she was dealing with her health issues. And I was just like, change your mind. Stop being a victim. Meanwhile, I was in that same victim mentality. I wanted her to stop being a victim so she could take care of me. Right. And that's toxic. That is toxic. She was already having a hard time dealing with the energy leak that is her health challenges. And here I come along and I'm like, yeah. And instead of focusing on your problems, help fix me and take care of me. Right. So I was draining even more energy. And
And it really did take me focusing on myself. And again, this is one of these things where we've talked about in the past about our relationship, where we look at our arguments, our fights, the things that we've been through as challenges more than, oh my God, it's another fight. We suck. We're not meant to be together because we're having, we trigger each other, we upset each other. All of the stuff that we went through really strengthened our connection and our relationship. But it really did take me kind of pulling aside, because what I wanted was Danny to take care of me. I wanted him to just empathize with me and love me back to health. And he couldn't do that because he was stuck in his own narcissism.
Yeah.
And what I ended up doing, the only way that it worked out, was I ended up taking care of myself. I learned how to care for myself, how to set clear boundaries, because there were moments where I had to tell Danny, no, this is where I draw the line. I am not okay with this. If you're not willing to accept this, we can go our separate ways. I'm not going to continue this pattern. So you have a choice. You can either walk away or you can change this, because I am no longer allowing this. And that also meant that I was taking responsibility for myself. I was taking responsibility for my health, for my emotional needs. And yeah, that meant at times setting clear boundaries. And it was difficult because at the time when Danny was fully deep into his narcissism, he was very needy. He wanted the attention. There were times where he would hurt me and I would end up comforting him afterwards, because he would flip it around about how he was the victim in the situation. And there were times where I was like, I'm sorry, you're not the victim in this situation. And I'm not going to allow that. I'm taking care of myself. And when I began taking care of myself, empowering myself, that kind of caused him to step up. He had to step up because otherwise he was going to be left behind. Yeah. And I think that, that goes to the point of putting on the mask yourself first. When I learned to take care of myself and my needs and not need his approval or not need him to take care of me, I was able to set clear boundaries, and it gave him a different perspective of our relationship. And yeah, absolutely.
Attention is the supply. Kathleen, we never broke. Well, we maybe did break up like on a few occasions for like a few hours, but we never had to break up the way you kind of had to break up with your son at this point. But the threats of breaking up, I shouldn't even say threats, her standing firmly in her boundaries was the wake-up call that I needed to do my work and get off my hamster wheel. So as painful as it was at the time, it was necessary. So take heart, because, I accidentally switched comments there, because maybe this will be the wake-up call that he needs. I also think that there could be attachments, right? We maybe have attachments to how we want or expect our kids to act, and sometimes they don't act within those boundaries. So maybe don't be attached to an outcome of how he might change or how you think he should change. You can just continue to love him from afar until you feel strong enough to be able to set those boundaries and say, we can have a relationship when you can respect my boundaries. And not allow and not try to, suck my energy out. Cheryl asked, how do you keep from being hurt? You can't. I think that's the fallacy. The fallacy is that we can keep ourselves from being hurt. Life is pain sometimes, and we're going to be hurt, and we have to start coming at it from the perspective that if we feel pain, then we can appreciate joy and happiness more, right? If you have that contrast, you can appreciate the good times when you have a bad time to compare it to, right?
And the pain, I think, is also
it's like a red flag. It tells you when there's a problem, right? You're having pain because you didn't know how to set. Kathleen had pain because she wasn't setting proper boundaries with her son, and so now she can set those boundaries. And not to say that she won't feel the pain, but as she integrates it, right? Like as she becomes more comfortable with the fact that my son
more
has
in a state of allowance,
in a state of allowance, that he has to go through whatever this is that he's going through so that he can learn from it and come out better and come out healed.
And
she'll be able to
Yeah.
It won't be as painful.
I think that's what the pain is, right? It's like Danny said, it's a red flag. And when that happens, I think our job is to look at where that pain is stemming from. Is it triggering an old wound? Is it triggered by an attachment that we have to a particular outcome? Is it triggered because this relationship no longer serves us? There are so many possibilities, and it takes time to be able to hone in on what exactly it is that is being triggered in this moment, or what this pain is trying to signal. But that's what it's there for. So we're never going to get to a place where we're not going to experience pain, but we'll be able to learn to identify why we are experiencing the pain. Is it my attachment? Is it this relationship doesn't serve me? What is the real source of this pain?
So Kathleen says she's married to a narcissist and he hates her strength. And Cheryl is saying, what do you do when your partner isn't respecting your boundaries? So my response to this, as a recovering narcissist, I would say that the reason people are narcissists, as I mentioned before, it's a defense mechanism. For me personally, I felt neglected by my mother. And because of that neglect, I became, I don't want to use the word, I was going to say attention whore. I don't really like that, the connotation of that, but I became an emotional vampire. I needed all the attention constantly to make up for the fact that I felt like I didn't get enough attention from my mom. So if you can look at it as, if you can look at your husband with compassion and say, okay, he's a narcissist, and maybe that he has the same issue. Maybe it's a mommy issue or a daddy issue. I don't know, whatever his issue is. Maybe if you can figure out how to get to the bottom of what the root is that caused him to revert into that narcissistic behavior, you can have compassion and say, oh, I can have compassion just the way Vanessa did for me. She had compassion for 12-year-old Danny, who felt like his mother didn't pay attention to him. And so therefore he had developed this need for attention that became toxic. So if you can do that while setting boundaries, while saying, you know, honey, I love you and I understand that you're in pain, and, you know, maybe he's not ready to deal with that pain. And so he'll be in denial. I'm not a narcissist. You're just making stuff, you know, like these are things that I used to say until he's ready. Or if there's so much abuse, whether it's physical or emotional, you may need to separate for a while. And that may be the wake-up call he needs. I don't know. These are all things that are up to you. And Cheryl, you know, if you're, I don't know if this is just you're going through something similar. I think it becomes how much you can bear, how much patience and empathy you can have while not sacrificing your own emotional and spiritual health. And that's going to be different for everybody. Vanessa had a very high tolerance for pain, and she was able to tolerate a lot and still remain patient and compassionate towards me, where she really inspired me to heal. And that's all you can do, is inspire people. Your love is not really going to heal them as much as inspire them to heal themselves. A narcissist has to choose to walk away from those toxic tendencies. They have to choose, not just he, but they have to choose to stop dwelling in that, right? I had to choose to say, I felt like my mom wasn't paying attention to me, but I have to look at what my mom was going through at the time. She was going through a divorce with my dad. You know, what I ended up realizing after looking at it objectively was that my mom wasn't rejecting me at the time. She just needed her own self-care time. The reason I felt neglected was because she was going out with her friends a lot. She was going to the gym a lot. And as a kid, I didn't understand that. Now, as a parent, I understand. Sometimes you just need time away from your kids. You need some alone time. She was going to the gym for stress relief and to deal with, you know, the stress of the divorce and all that. So now I was able to see, oh, she wasn't actually neglecting me. So I was able to integrate that, release that, and now I no longer need those narcissistic tendencies. I no longer need to be the center of attention, because I now know, oh, my mom did love me and she was paying attention to me. There was just this short period in her life where she was so stressed out. She needed to go to the gym a lot. She needed to spend time with some friends so she could get her own emotional and mental health, you know, in order. So, that was a lot.
But yeah, and I think that what it boils down to is that there has to be a willingness. If your partner is saying, okay, I'm willing to look at these things. There were moments where I could see Danny was willing to work through the issues. And yeah, he had moments where he fell back into some narcissistic tendencies, but we always pulled through where it was like, okay, I fell back into this. I see it. I want to fix it. It was a struggle. It was a really huge struggle. And we went through it for a few years.
Yeah.
But there was always a willingness there. And for me, that was enough for me to say, all right, he's trying to change. And we've gotten to a place where the falling back into these behaviors is now like a blip. And it's almost like it's this quick thing where there are plenty of times where he just says, oh my God, I just had the same feeling, or this triggered that. Like, we're able to see the triggers very easily. And sometimes just saying them out loud is really helpful to say, oh my God, this comment triggered this feeling. And then you talk out, where it came from, and you're like, oh, that's what it was. It wasn't even that you said this. It was that it reminded me of that, and that still hasn't been healed. So let me go work on that so that it doesn't affect our relationship.
Yeah. And, Derek brings up a really great point as well, about the narcissist being willing to grow and being honest. And narcissism is self-abuse. I did not love myself. And Vanessa talked about before how when I was unable to empathize with her health issues, she was forced to love herself. She was forced to be compassionate with herself. And that helped her to grow. And then that growth inspired me to start loving myself. And I still struggle with it. So this is a very active thing that I struggle with on a daily basis. I have to have conversations with myself when I get down on myself about, even when we're doing art and it's not coming out the way I'd like it to, I start to judge myself, and you suck, you're not good at drawing. These are things that I still deal with, negative self-talk. And I have to remind myself, positive self-talk, positive affirmations, love myself.
And this last sentence says it's self-abuse to accept the boundaries being crossed. So when you've chosen to honor yourself and set boundaries, it's important to remember that allowing those boundaries to be crossed is also self-abuse, and it's not helping the other person, and it's not helping you. And if you really, really care about helping the other person, those boundaries are important for both of you. So you'll have the energy to be able to help them through the struggle they're going through. And yeah, there were times where boundaries were crossed, and I had to say to Danny, this is unacceptable. I am not accepting this anymore. Are you going to admit that you did something wrong? Because a lot of times he had a hard time admitting that he was doing something wrong. There were excuses, and the ego tries to deny it and justify it in some way. And for me, it was very important that he be clear about what happened, that he was aware that what he was doing was was wrong, that it was unacceptable, and that it had crossed a boundary. We created agreements within our relationship, and it was important for me to maintain those agreements. So, and I think, like Danny said, that strength, that decision making, those boundaries are important, even for the other person to see that you are rooted in your power and saying, I'm not willing to accept this anymore. It is a jolt for the other person to say, wait a minute, why is this person not accepting this behavior anymore? It kind of forces you to look at yourself. I'm so glad that this topic has been helpful and that you guys are getting something out of it. And we truly appreciate your comments, your vulnerability with sharing some of your experiences as well. As we've mentioned before, this podcast, this live stream is intended to be like a community conversation for us to talk these things through, to share our experiences, to share suggestions, things that have worked for you guys, things that have worked for us. As we've said before, we're not experts. We don't have all of the answers. We're figuring it out as we go along also. But we love the fact that this is a community conversation, that we can work through this together and come up with solutions together and help each other perhaps view things in a different way.
Absolutely. I can't believe the show already is over. But, I do want to just kind of say, and I probably should have said this in the beginning, I think I did kind of touch on how the right generally views victim mentality. And I think a lot of times they use that to dismiss the experiences of other people and the points of view of other people. And I kind of talked about a little bit about how I think that's going too far. You're not coming from a place of empathy and compassion. There are victims in this world. I don't want to make it sound like there's no such thing as being victimized and it's all in our heads. Absolutely not. Specifically, I think the right, and somebody mentioned Candace Owens, she tends to use it in reference to Black Lives Matter and what they call race baiting or identity politics. And so I want to say that there is victimization. You know, there is racism. Racism exists. So this is not to say that it's all in people of color's minds that it's racism, that there's racism, and that they're oppressed, because clearly they are. I mean, we're a 70% white majority country, and just by virtue of the fact that it's a democracy, which means the majority rules, the 70% is going to vote for policies that benefit it. And we don't always recognize how our privilege or the fact that we're part of that majority affects minorities. So I do want to say that there is victimization, but the idea is to not stay in that victim mentality, because you can overcome it. There are ways to overcome it, and obviously we've discussed those things. So I don't want anybody to feel like we're saying that there's no such thing as victimization. Obviously there is, but to a degree, as we've kind of talked about with setting boundaries, you are only treated the way you allow people to treat you. And sometimes you have to get creative about the way you set boundaries and the way you enforce those boundaries, especially in those types of situations, like with Black Lives Matter and those things.
And remembering that, yesterday we were on a Zoom call, and the host was talking about how we choose to participate in certain situations. We're led to believe that power is outside of us, yes, that there's somebody out there that has power over us. And that doesn't have to be the case. We all have power within us. We all are the owners of our own lives, the creators of our own lives. We all have the power to create the life that we want. These outside sources are only in existence because we allow them to exist by giving them that power. And when we learn to take that power back, we do become sovereign beings. We do realize that life is ours. We can do whatever we want with it. And
we embody not that we become sovereign beings, but we're embodying our sovereignty that we always have, whether we believe it or not. We are all sovereign beings who we do have power. We have a direct connection to, via the law of attraction, we can summon the power of the universe to create the life we want. And really, it's just about reprogramming our thinking to not live in that victim mentality where I'm subject to whatever the government does. The government puts restrictions on me because of the pandemic. And now they're going to be, wanting to make, vaccine passports for us to travel and all this stuff. Yeah, maybe they're going to implement all these things, but you know what? The law of attraction can be like Jedi powers, right? These are not the COVID victims you're looking for, right? We can kind of walk through life and manifest ourselves the life we want. And that doesn't mean we'll never be faced with challenges. It doesn't mean we'll never come to a checkpoint. But you know what? Maybe the checkpoint that day you get overlooked, or maybe the guy lets you through anyway, or who knows? Maybe it's somebody who has whatever. The point is that
the possibilities are endless.
The possibilities are endless. Don't limit yourself by saying, oh, they're passing this new law now, it's going to be forced on me. No, maybe not.
It doesn't have to be forced on you. And again, it all comes back to reclaiming that power. And yeah, there was a time where we were forced to believe, or we were led to believe, that somebody outside of us has power. We're unlearning that. And I think as a collective society, a lot of us are unlearning that. And that's beautiful, because it will allow us to embody the power that is innately within us. And And that's it.
Absolutely. Another great show. Thank you so much. We had so many great comments, and we really appreciate you guys taking part. If you felt like you got any benefit out of this, we would love it if you could share this and help us get the message out and expand this community and grow the conversation, because we feel like the more points of view that we can bring together in these discussions, the more robust the discussions are, and the more creative, solutions we can come up with for these challenges, right? Like, everybody's contributing. So it's not about us being any kind of gurus or experts. We're just here sharing things that have worked for us to help us improve our lives. And, if you guys can get some, benefit out of some of these things we've done, or if you can give us benefit by giving us other solutions, all the better. So thanks so much.
And leave us your suggestions for topics to cover. Somebody commented something about creative ways to set boundaries. So maybe we'll come up with some ideas for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us again this week. We hope to be here next week and tackle another interesting topic. Danny's going to share some of our social media handles.
Here's our social media. You can check us out on all the big social media companies, of course, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. But with the big social media companies, big tech companies openly censoring now, I always like to promote Minds.com and the Float app, because these are two social media companies that are committed to, first of all, privacy. They don't sell your information the way Facebook and the big companies do, and they don't censor. So we've all experienced it with the pandemic, where they're censoring information about vitamin C, helping COVID, and all these natural things that they're calling conspiracy theories. They're just openly saying now that they're going to censor certain points of view. So, and we are strong believers in freedom of information, and that people have the responsibility to vet their own information, and that we shouldn't be censoring what information people have access to. We should have the most amount of information so we can make the best choices. So check us out on Minds.com and the Float app. And we really appreciate you guys for being here with us. Thank you, and have a great Sunday.
Bye.